We are so fortunate tonight to have Ann Ryder with us as our featured speaker. You perhaps will remember Ann as an anchor on Channel 13 for 20 years, I believe. And when Ann was 2 months pregnant with Jenny, she was in Calcutta and got a personal interview with Mother Teresa. And actually, Mother Teresa said, "You're going to have a girl," and prayed over her. And so when Jenny was born, her name became Jenny Teresa, which I think is pretty special. She'll share, hopefully, a little bit of that with you. But anyway, as I was thinking about Ann, I thought, here's a woman, in her first few years of adult life, did a lot of talking. In the last few years, she's done a lot of listening. And so I think because of that, she has something to say to us tonight. So please welcome Ann Ryder.
I'm very glad to be here tonight, and I won't talk too long, I promise. I want to start by paraphrasing scripture, Matthew 25, because when I was in Calcutta and was lucky enough to get the interview with Mother Teresa, which I didn't think I was going to get, I sat across from her, and within the first 5 minutes, she did something that she would have done with you had you been there too. She would have taken your hand in hers and counted out Matthew 25. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was homeless, you took me in. When I was sick and in prison, you visited me. All these things you did for the least, you did them for me. And then she said, and then you put these two hands together, and she put them in the praying formation, and she said, and you will be holy. And she put her hands over mine. And then she gave me the sweetest, most radiant smile. It was about service. That's what it was about. And it was about stepping out in faith for Mother Teresa. And that's why her message is congruent with yours tonight. She was on a train from Calcutta to Darjeeling, listening, when she heard the voice of God. And I asked her in the interview, I said, did you actually hear the voice of God? And she said, no. She said, I heard it in my heart. And it said, leave your comfort zone. Leave everything you know. Leave your comfort zone. Go to the streets. Now people say, Mother Teresa, well, she was in Calcutta. She saw the poor and dying. Of course she went to the streets because she was so empathetic. She would have been the first to tell you she never would have left if not for the voice. And she never would have listened to the voice if not for the prayer. If not for the prayer. And so she left the convent. She didn't have the permission of the Archbishop, and she went to the streets. When she stepped out, she didn't have a plan. She didn't have a building. She didn't have medicine. She didn't have people working for her. She didn't have doctors. She didn't have nurses. There was nothing about it that was planned. And when I saw Amy up here talking about what she was talking about, and how God answered so many things, and how God worked so many miracles. Yes, and it's not always on our time. So often it's not. And yet, I keep thinking about Grace on Wings, and I keep thinking about the congruence here. And so there's something I want everybody here to think about too, because I think there's something to this. I want you to get the image of a golden thread, okay? And this is a golden thread that looks very fragile, but it's very, very strong. And this thread weaves through everybody in this room tonight, and it weaves back to the people at home or in other cities, maybe that you are related to, that you love, and it weaves into people that you find difficult to love, that you know. And it weaves through, it weaves into places that are very disturbed, and it weaves back up to our Creator. There is something with the golden thread here because it shows up best in the dark, not the light. And I do think that we're living in pretty dark times. But if you start to look for it, you'll find it. I went out to the desert because I was in need of a retreat, and I had a friend with a very lovely place about 10 miles out into the desert. And I get there and I think, well, at least I'm here. And I go and I punch in the thing to her garage, and the garage door doesn't open. And I try it about 16 times and it doesn't open, and it finally dawns on me, you're not getting in. So I'm going to spend the night in the rental car. About every hour I had to turn on the car. By the way, I dug in my little bag and got my night cream on and got my socks on and the whole bit. I'm ready to go. About 3 o'clock in the morning, viscerally, it dawned on me that there are people living this way, living in their cars. And I thought, oh, lesson number 1. Then the other thing I thought about, and I stepped out at about 3 in the morning, and I looked up, and it was like a bowl of stars. I mean, it was beautiful, mountains all around me. The other thing I thought about was there's a flower that blooms in the desert, and it's called Queen of the Night. And it blooms one night a year. And it's on a dark night that it blooms. And it hides in a nondescript bush the rest of the time. And so one night a year, when the sun goes down, and usually the moon's not too bright, out comes this flower, and it's the most fragrant thing you've ever smelled. And it's beautiful, and its petals look like the tutu of a ballerina in Swan Lake. And at the center of the flower is a golden filament of thread. But if you shine the light on it, it quivers and closes. And I thought, there are people like that. There are people like that, a lot of them, among us. And I think the significance of the golden thread and how it shows up, sometimes best in the dark, is that sometimes when it's very hard to see and feel God, it's that thread we hang on to. And I don't know about you, but I've never known so many people who are hanging on by a thread than now. People who have lost their jobs, lost their relationships, are in financial crisis, are in spiritual crisis, some kind of crisis. I have never seen anything like it. And so that thread keeps showing up in one way or another. I had the opportunity at Channel 13, through Hope to Tell, to interview some of the most spiritually evolved people on the planet. But I interviewed these people and I found they had 3 things in common. 3 things. Number 1, they know, revere, and make time for silence. Some call it prayer, some call it silence, but it is listening. And you hit it on the head when you said, Gary, that I've been real busy talking most of my life. And I've asked my 14-year-old daughter, I still am, but I really am trying to turn the equation and listen. And when you do it long enough, it's like water. If you don't, you're so thirsty. You've got to get it. And it's not filling it, it's listening. For Mother Teresa, it was called prayer, of course. For you, for all of you, I'm sure it's prayer. But sometimes it's just quieting down and being in the presence of and seeing what comes. That person you know you ought to call. That letter you ought to write. I'm still a believer in thank you cards. So number 1, silence. Number 2, gratitude, active gratitude. Even when you feel that there's nothing to be grateful for, there always is, especially on the days when it's hard. And the third thing is when difficult things happen, and they do in every life. Ask anyone, sit next to anyone on a plane, and you'll get their story. When difficult things happen, when you can, turn that equation and use that thing to connect, like that golden thread.